Our next story is about Sudan. It is in crisis and the world is not even talking about it. Today, the Sudanese military has retaken the presidential palace, which is the seat of the government in capital Khartoum. This is a major victory for them. After almost 2 years of a brutal civil war, which the United Nations has described as the world's largest and most devastating humanitarian crisis, Friday's victory is perhaps the army's most symbolic, since they launched a key counter-offensive against the paramilitary rapid support forces in September last year. However, the war is far from over. The RSF still controls large parts of Khartoum as well as other regions, posing a formidable challenge to the Sudanese army. This is a brutal conflict with mass displacement, famine and genocide. The crisis in Sudan is spiraling out of control. More than 11 million people have been forced from their homes. Children as young as 1 are being subjected to horrific violence, and entire communities are being wiped out. Yet, as the world focuses on Ukraine and Gaza, Sudan's suffering is largely ignored. Here's what you should be knowing about one of the deadliest crises taking place in Africa on Friday. The Sudanese army soldiers were seen hoisting their weapons and celebrating outside the country's presidential palace in Khartoum. Video released by the Sudanese army showed the army personnel inside the presidential palace. And Friday's developments were one of the most significant advances in the 2-year-old conflict that has threatened to fracture the country. The building was the last heavily guarded RSF bastion in the city. A spokesperson for the Sudanese military said, Brigadier General Nabil Abdullah said in a video statement posted on social media that the army has crushed fighters from the rapid support forces and retaken the Republican Palace, which he described as a symbol of sovereignty and dignity of the Sudanese nation. But will this war end? The short answer to that question is unlikely. The military victory in Khartoum will likely just move the war in Sudan into a new chapter. You see, the RSF in a statement on its social media account said that the battle for the palace has not ended yet, as its forces were still in the vicinity of the area. The rebel group said its forces have attacked members of the military inside the palace. The RSF also still controls major areas in other parts of the country, including the western Darfur region, which means that fighting has just created a de facto partition of Sudan into military and RSF-run zones. The war erupted in April 2023 between the military and the RSF. Battles raged in Khartoum and around the country. The leaders of the two forces, who had been allies, were meant to have overseen the democratic transition after a popular uprising in 2019. But what happened instead was a bloody fight for power between the RSF and military. Since then, at least 28,000 people have been killed, though the number is likely far higher. The war has driven more than 14 million people from their homes and pushed parts of the country into famine. The war has made Sudan the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The numbers are staggering. The World Health Organization says at least 20,000 people have so far been killed in the war in Sudan. Other estimates put the toll to 150,000. According to UN figures, at least 10 million people in Sudan have been forced from their homes, making it the world's largest displacement crisis. In August last year, a UN-backed assessment declared a famine in the Zamzam refugee camp located in the western Darfur region, largely controlled by RSF paramilitary. According to a recent report by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, RSF fighters had detained at least 10,000 people in Khartoum since the start of the war until June last year. With the military and the RSF, they are accused of abuses. But RSF has been accused of various other atrocities. In January, the outgoing Biden administration imposed sanctions on Burhan, Sudan's army chief, and the RSF head Hemedti. The RSF grew out of the notorious Janjaweed militias mobilized 2 decades ago by then-President Omar al-Bashir against populations that rather identify as Central or East African in Darfur. The Janjaweed were accused of mass killings, rapes and other atrocities. The RSF now operates as a well-equipped and rather highly strong force, relying on guerrilla warfare tactics. Unlike the Sudanese military, which controls the country's air force and heavy artillery, the RSF specializes in urban combat, ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. Now, the army in Sudan captures of the presidential palace raises fears that Sudan is increasingly approaching a de facto partition. The RSF is already backing a parallel government and remains in control of 4 of the 5 regions in the sprawling region of Darfur. Experts on Sudan say that Sudan appears to be heading to a Libya scenario, referencing the split in governance between the 2 competing authorities who are aligned with a web of armed groups and militias. What about peace, if you wonder? The army has long refused to engage in peace talks with the RSF and has repeatedly said it plans to recapture the entire country. How long that takes, that's anybody's guess. For now, one of the biggest worry with Sudan is whether it faces a second partition.